So a few months ago, I made a video teaching you some of the basics of film photography, but today I want to talk to you why just a few months after that video, I decided to switch to digital. I ended up ultimately switching to the x100v, but it's quite a story. And so today I want to tell you about why I made that switch, how I'm liking it so far, and also some of the struggles that come with switching formats. If you find this video helpful at all, or you're considering making the switch and you have similar questions that I had or reasonings of doing so that I had, please feel free to like this video and leave a comment if you have any questions about things that I didn't answer, and I'll do my best to answer them. So when I made my video about film photography, I'd been shooting film for about 3 years at that point, and I never really saw myself stopping shooting film. But shortly after that video, I broke 2 of my film cameras within like 2 or 3 weeks. And that meant doing a ton of research into what new film camera I need to buy, cutting like a couple rolls short and having to get them developed early. And there was a lot of fear that I would lose some of these memories that I'd shot on film. And that became increasingly stressful, especially after like the second camera broke. It was like, Jesus, you can't really invest a lot of money into a film camera when you just don't know how the results are going to turn out, or if there's any consistency with the results, or if it's just going to break on you one day and it's this 40-year-old camera that you can't get any new parts for. My goal with photography has always been to take candid moments of my friends and family and the people that I love, and so each shot that I take is really important to me. And so the idea of losing the last month or 2 of memories because a roll of film got developed wrong or the camera broke was just really stressful. And sort of as this was happening, one day in my YouTube recommendations, I saw a video about this little known camera called the Fuji x100v. And this video was advertising it as a digital camera that could produce film-like results. I watched the video, I was hooked pretty instantly, and thus began my journey of spending a ridiculous amount of money to replace and try and match the look of my $50 film camera. At the time, the idea of spending $1,400 on the x100v just felt like too big of a bullet to bite. And looking at the differences between all of the models, I ended up settling on the x100t, which I thought would pretty much give me everything I was looking for and would also save me $800. I'm going to show you some pictures that I took with the x100t while we talk, but I ended up keeping it for 4 months and I really liked most of it. It did about 80% of what I wanted it to do, but that last 20% meant that with almost every photo I took, I still had to make changes after the picture was taken to get it to something that I liked. And like, that's not the biggest of deals, but I was spending all of this money specifically to replace the film look that would sort of just give me the results I wanted straight out of the camera. And so the idea that I still had to make changes for every photo that were pretty major changes, it wasn't just like changing the exposure or increasing the saturation, it was sort of a bummer. One consideration that I made was the fact that the x100t did not have weather sealing and the x100v does. And I live in California, and so I was like, I do not need weather sealing. I'll be fine. I live in sunny San Francisco, like I'll be okay. And then of course the day after I bought the x100t was the first day that it started raining in what would be the most rainy winter in a long time in California. This state is no longer in a drought. That is how rainy it's been over the last 4 months. And every time it rained, I just couldn't bring myself to take the camera out because I was worried that it would break in the rain or something. And so I missed a lot of shots. Another thing that you're going to want to think about before deciding which model to purchase that I didn't super think about was the film recipes, which were probably the most important part of the purchasing decision for me and for my needs and what I wanted to use this camera for. Pretty much all of the film recipes you see on YouTube are designed for the x100v. And while they are somewhat cross-compatible, the results you would get using those recipes on your x100t would look pretty different than the results you would get on the x100v. And some of the settings you can change on the newer models are not available on the older models. And so what that meant is that in order to find film recipes I would like, I would go to Fuji X Weekly and search for recipes that used my camera's sensor, which at the time was an older sensor. And Fuji X Weekly had a lot of recipes that looked pretty good, but they were all pretty specialized, and I wanted a recipe that I could sort of just set and forget. And so because they were all a little too specialized, it took a while to find a recipe that I liked and could be used in most situations. And it ended up being a recipe that I came up with myself. I wish I still had it. I don't have the camera anymore, so I don't remember, but it took a while to nail those settings in. And along those lines, with the X100V, when you create your custom profile, you can rename the profile so that way you always know what it is in the future. With the 100T, you cannot rename your 7 custom profiles. So I had like a note in my iPhone Notes app that told me which each custom profile was. And the one other thing that I didn't think of before switching over to digital that sort of became a problem for me was how digital images fall apart as you zoom in closer. With film, there's this like beautiful grain that when you zoom in on your scanned images, sure, there's almost no detail after a certain point, but the grain can still give it this quality that is tolerable and it's still nice to look at. Whereas with digital, the images just become mushy in a way that is very unappealing and sort of ugly. On the X100T, there is no setting to bake in grain to the images, whereas on the X100V there is. And so I'll show you a bit of a difference between the 3 models, the X100T, the X100V, and a film photo that I took. So you can sort of see why I really wanted that grain there. And so look, can you put grain in post? Yes. Can you create your own simulations in post? Yes. But I was spending all this money on a camera that I wanted to just be able to do it for me. And that camera was the X100V, not the X100T. So ultimately, a little over a month ago, I pulled the trigger. I bought the X100V, I sold my X100T, and I've shot about 300 photos since then, and I'm pretty in love with it. There's a couple things that take getting used to, but if the X100T got me like 80% of the way there, this 100V gets me 100% of the way there. I press the shutter and the photo that it gives me is the one that I use, and I love it, and I rarely, if ever, need to make any changes. The colors coming out of this camera, the grittiness of the photos from the grain, and even the flash, which is on all models, but they all come together to give these images a really filmic quality to them that gives them an instant nostalgia, which I didn't feel as much with the 100T or even some of the film photos that I took. The black filter you see on the front of this camera is a Tiffin Glimmerglass 1 filter, which helps to really soften the image, take away some of that digital sharpness that you're getting from most digital sensors. And it really helps to also bloom the light, especially at night. And it creates a less contrasty image where the light seems to just roll in a really filmic way. It also conveniently requires the filter adapter, which in combination with the Glimmerglass filter makes this camera weather resistant. And also the 26 megapixel sensor just gives me so much more flexibility for cropping images when compared to the X100T sensor, which was good for just the full image, but as soon as you start to crop, you get that digital mush, and it's just not as good as the results from this. So I feel like I have a lot more flexibility with this sensor as compared to the older models and even the film cameras that I was using. But I paid $1,700 for this camera. I had to buy it from someone on Facebook Marketplace. I got it new, but it was $1,700. So am I gonna take this out in the rain? Absolutely not. I don't care how weather sealed this is. It's too new and too expensive for me to take this out into the rain. And that's like perhaps the biggest downside of this camera is the price. Dropping $1,700 or even $1,400 on a digital camera is not something I'm familiar with coming from film. Given that I'm not a professional photographer, it was really hard to justify spending that much, especially when you can get some really great results from $50 film cameras. But I think the difference is the longevity, or at least the perceived longevity of this camera. I just feel like it's gonna last me a lot longer than the film cameras, and I have so much more peace of mind just shooting on digital, and I can still get those really nostalgic results that I'm looking for. The other downside that I've noticed with this camera is, surprisingly, its portability. Don't get me wrong, this is like a pretty small camera. It's definitely a point and shoot, but it is not small enough to fit in any pocket. It's not even gonna fit in most jacket pockets, I would say. The only ones that it would really conveniently fit into is maybe a big winter coat. In any season but winter, you're definitely gonna have to pair this with a camera strap or a camera bag. And it's not that this camera is super heavy or inconvenient to carry around, but it's definitely heavier and a bit bigger than some of the film point and shoot cameras I was using. And so there's absolutely been more friction taking this and figuring out how to carry this with me everywhere when compared to the film cameras I was using. Overall though, I am in love with this camera. It's been a joy to use for the past month. I have 2 film simulation profiles that I really love and use interchangeably. And I have my one that I just sort of set it and forget it. And then that one can sometimes give some weird skin tone. So if it's going to be a weird skin tone moment, I'll switch it over to the other one. But yeah, I think if you're in a similar position that I was, I think any camera from the Fuji line would be super good. This is just my experience with the x100v and some of the issues I had with their older model, the x100t. If you don't think you'd be bothered by those issues, then go for the x100t, save yourself a lot of money. Otherwise, I would do some thinking about what you really need from a picture camera, or if you're going to be shooting videos. I don't think this is a great video camera given the 35mm focal length, especially not for videos like this. If you have any more questions for me, feel free to leave a comment and I will do my best to answer them. And I think I'm going to leave you off with a picture of you, which is how I ended my film video. So I will go ahead and take a picture of you now and we'll compare the shots so you can sort of see how a film camera interprets it versus how this camera does.
All right, smile.
Okay, and I'm also gonna go ahead and take a nice photo of the city for you back there so you can see the view on the 6th floor of Soda in Berkeley, California. You should come visit. It's a nice place. Anyways, I'll see you next time. Thanks for joining in.